In the attic of an old building in Paris's Montmartre district, during renovations in 2019, workers found a dust-covered chest. Inside were 12 old recording reels, yellowed notes, and a document stamped "Do Not Release Columbia Records, 1949." No one realized at that moment that this was one of music history's greatest lost treasures. 12 songs that Billie Holiday recorded during her 1949 European tour in Paris, but were never released to the world. The record company had seized these recordings because Billie hadn't just sung in that studio, she had improvised lyrics that openly condemned the US government, the FBI, and racism. For 70 years, these recordings were thought to be lost. But the truth was much darker. The recordings weren't lost. They were hidden, and one of them was still considered so dangerous that even in 2024, its full version was banned from release. This isn't just the story of lost records, it's the story of a system trying to silence a woman's voice. If you want to discover the darkest secrets hidden in music history, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Because the story we're telling today isn't just about lost recordings. It's about freedom, censorship, and a woman's voice that couldn't be silenced. When Billie Holiday set foot in Europe in March 1949, she was just emerging from the darkest period of her life. She had spent 10 months at Alderson Prison in 1947 for heroin possession. When she got out of prison, her career seemed finished. Her cabaret card had been revoked at all New York jazz clubs because artists with drug records couldn't perform on stage. She couldn't sing in America anymore. The federal government had silenced her. But Europe was different. Europe welcomed her like a hero. After World War II, Europe was hosting major American jazz stars for the first time, and Billie Holiday was the most anticipated name. At the Palladium Theatre in London, at l'Olympia in Paris, at Concerthuset in Stockholm, sold-out venues, and standing ovations lasting for minutes everywhere. The European press wrote America's greatest voice is finally free, and for Billie that word meant everything: freedom. In America there was FBI surveillance, constant police raids, club bans, but in Europe, at least for a while, she was free. When she arrived in Paris, it was May, and the city was filled with spring flowers. Billie settled into a small hotel in the Montmartre district and performed at l'Olympia on her first night. The venue was completely full, 2,000 people, and in the front rows sat the French intellectual elite. Edith Piaf, Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, young writer James Baldwin. When Billie took the stage, silence fell, and when she began singing Strange Fruit, the hall started crying. Because Europe understood, this song wasn't just a protest, it was a scream. After the concert, dozens of people came to Billie's dressing room, brought flowers, thanked her while crying. And that night, Billie made a decision. There was something else she would do on this European tour: say what she couldn't say, record the lyrics that were censored in America, leave forever the truths that the FBI, record companies, and white America didn't want to hear. But how would she do this? The official recording plan already existed. Columbia Records wanted to record a few songs after the tour, but Columbia would control everything: producers, engineers, company executives. They would all be there and monitor what Billie said. Billie needed another way. And in mid-May, a young French sound engineer she met at a jazz club in Paris offered her the solution. Studio Ferber, a small, independent recording studio in Montmartre. The owner, Henri Ferber, was an elderly French Jew who loved jazz and hated Columbia Records. He remembered how during the Nazi occupation, American record companies did nothing to protect Jewish artists in Europe. When Billie met Ferber and told her story, that she wanted to say what she couldn't say in America, to record it, Ferber didn't hesitate. "My studio is yours, Lady Day," he said. "Say whatever you want to say, I'll record it." When Billie Holiday arrived at Studio Ferber on the night of May 23, 1949, it was past midnight. Her official concert was over. She had gotten away from Columbia Records officials, and now she was free. The studio was small, just one recording room, a few microphones, old but quality equipment. Henri Ferber and his young assistant Claude were there. Billie had brought pianist Bobby Tucker with her mom. She trusted him and Bobby knew Billie's plan. Tonight Billie told Ferber, "I'm going to sing my songs, with my lyrics, not Columbia's versions." Ferber smiled and started the recording device. Billie approached the microphone, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath, and then she began to sing. The first song was Strange Fruit, but a version no one had heard. After singing the original lyrics, Billie didn't stop, she continued. She added new verses, new images. Which state governors turned a blind eye to lynchings? Which senators blocked anti-lynching legislation? Which newspapers didn't write the stories? She named names, real people's names. Bobby Tucker felt his hands trembling as he played the piano because he knew that if this recording was released in America, they would all be punished. But Billie didn't care anymore. They had silenced her for years, censored her words for years. Now in Paris, at midnight in a small studio, no one could stop her. The second song was God Bless the Child. Billie had written this song in 1941 after her mother stole her money. God bless the child that's got his own, she sang. But tonight she added a new verse. If you've got an FBI file, you can't have your own. She said J. Edgar Hoover's name. The FBI director, the man who had turned Billie's life into hell. Mr. Hoover is following me, she said, in the middle of the song. Every night, every club, his agents are there. Because I'm a black woman, and I'm telling the truth. Henri Ferber sat in the control room in shock. These recordings couldn't be released in America. That was clear. But maybe they could be released in Europe. Maybe the world could finally hear Billie Holiday's uncensored voice. As the night progressed, Billie moved from song to song. In each one were new lyrics, new truths. While singing Fine and Mellow, she talked about her 10 months at Alderson Prison, how they locked her in a small cell, how they used psychological torture, how they applied punishment instead of heroin treatment. In My Man, she talked about Jimmy Monroe, Louis McKay, the exploitative men in her life, but also about the system. It's not just men who exploit me, record companies too. She named Columbia Records, told how they stole copyrights, how they paid low rates. These weren't just songs anymore, they were testimonies, confessions, and accusations. And Henri Ferber was recording every second. As it approached 4 in the morning, Billie was tired, but hadn't finished. There's one more song, she said. It doesn't have a name yet, just untitled song. Bobby Tucker was surprised, because he'd never heard this song. Billie explained. I wrote it last night. In my hotel room. This song is about everything. Racism, the FBI, America's hypocrisy. And this song can never be sung in America. But here tonight, I'll sing it. Ferber checked the recording device. There was still tape. There was space. I'm ready, he said. Sing Lady Day. Billie Holiday approached the microphone and began singing, untitled song. The first verses were slow, melancholic, like a typical Billie Holiday ballad. But then the lyrics hardened, anger came. Billie named President Truman, counted the black prisoners he could have stopped from being executed, but didn't. She named members of Congress, counted one by one, those who blocked anti-lynching legislation. Governors in southern states, sheriffs, judges, she named them all. And then came the most dangerous part. Billie named FBI agents themselves. She said the names of the agents who followed her, wiretapped her phones, destroyed her life in the song. Agent Fletcher knocked on my door. Agent White listened to my phone calls. Agent Davis set me up with heroin. Real names, real accusations. Bobby Tucker almost stopped playing the piano. This was too dangerous. This was like suicide. But Billie wasn't stopping. She kept singing. In the last section of the song, Billie went even further. They say freedom, but I see chains.
Where?
They say democracy, but I count lynchings. They say justice, but it's my people, filling the prisons. And then came the final verse, so powerful that Henri Ferber in the control room started crying. Strange fruit ain't hanging no more, 'cause now they lock them away. From trees to prisons they've moved, but the hate's still the same. The song ended. There was silence in the studio. Bobby Tucker moved away from the piano, his hands still trembling. Billie stood at the microphone, tears streaming from her eyes. Henri Ferber stopped the recording device and looked at Billie. Lady Day, he said slowly, this song could kill you. If this is released in America, they'll either arrest you or worse. Billie smiled, a bitter smile. I know, she said, but I had to say it. Somebody has to. When they left Studio Ferber that night, the sun was rising. Billie, Bobby, and Henri went to a nearby cafe for coffee and sat and talked. Henri Ferber was worried. What will we do with these recordings? Our Columbia Records will never release them. Maybe we can find a small record company in Europe. But Billie shook her head. No, keep these recordings, Henri. They won't be released now, maybe in 10 years, 20 years. If America changes, maybe then the world will be ready. Henri understood and made a promise. I'll keep them safe. And one day, when the world is ready, these recordings will come out. Billie thanked him and returned to her hotel. That afternoon, there was an official Columbia Records recording session. Clean, safe, censored versions. Billie performed there too, professional and flawless. But her real voice, her real anger, was on the tapes, in Henri Ferber's studio. But the secret couldn't be kept for long. Hey, Columbia Records executives had heard something. Whispers were circulating in the Paris jazz community. Billie recorded at a studio at midnight. She said very political things. Norman Granz, Billie's producer at that time, and someone working with Columbia, started to worry. Hey, asked Billie, did you make other recordings in Paris? Billie lied at first. Hey, no, only the ones with you. But Granz insisted, gathered information from other sources, and finally learned Henri Ferber's name. In June, before Billie returned to America, Granz went to Studio Ferber. Henri was there, and Granz asked directly, did Billie Holiday record here? Henri couldn't lie. Granz would find out eventually. Yes, he said, 12 songs. But these are private recordings. They won't be released. Granz wanted to listen to the recordings, and Henri couldn't refuse. They went into the control room together, and Henri played the tapes. As Granz listened to the first song, his face changed, first surprise, then fear. In the new version of Strange Fruit, there were names, there were accusations. In God Bless the Child, J. Edgar Hoover was mentioned. Before Granz got to the third song, he said, stop. Enough, I've heard them. Henri stopped the tape and looked at Granz. What are you going to do? He asked. Granz was silent for a long time, then answered, these recordings should never be released. They'll kill Billie. The FBI won't even need to order an assassination. They'll make up a car accident, a raid, something. These recordings are too dangerous. Henri objected, but they're the truth. Billie is telling the truth. Granz nodded. I know, but America isn't ready for the truth, and I don't want Billie to die. Granz made an offer. Columbia Records would buy these recordings. They would pay Henri good money. He would hand over the tapes, and the recordings would go into the records as lost. Henri refused at first. He had promised Billie, kept them safe, but Granz told the truth without being threatening. Henri, if you don't give these recordings, Columbia will take them legally. Billie has a contract. Every recording she makes belongs to the company. They'll go to court and win, and you'll get nothing. But if you give them now, at least you'll get money. And I promise these recordings won't be destroyed, just stored. Maybe one day, in the distant future, they can be released. Henri was desperate. He wanted to call Billie, but Granz said, she's already returned to America. And if you tell her, you'll put her in danger. Billie will try to fight for these recordings, and the FBI will come after her. If you want to protect her, you'll stay silent. Henry Ferber finally agreed. The next day, Columbia Records officials came to Studio Ferber, took possession of the tapes, and gave Henry a check. And those tapes were put in a chest, stamped "Do Not Release, Columbia Records 1949, and taken to the archives. But where were the archives? In New York? In Los Angeles? No, Columbia Records wanted to keep these recordings away from America. They didn't want them to fall into the FBI's hands, and in a strange decision, the tapes were sent back to Paris. They were stored on the upper floor of an old building in Montmartre, above Studio Ferber. Henry Ferber knew for years that those tapes were there, but never touched them. When he died in the 1960s, his son inherited the building, but never went up to that attic, and the tapes were forgotten. In the 1950s, Billie Holiday continued living in America, and her career approached its end. Heroin addiction, FBI pressure, health problems, everything was coming together. When she died in 1959, the world mourned the loss of Lady Day, but no one mentioned the Paris tapes. Even Norman Granz forgot, or wanted to forget. In Columbia Records archives, the recordings were marked as lost. Music historians speculated for years about the 1949 Paris recordings. Were they real, just a legend? Some jazz critics knew Henry Ferber's name, and elderly French sound engineers remembered that night. Yes, Billie Holiday recorded at Studio Ferber, they would say, but the tapes were lost, maybe destroyed. The truth was much simpler. The tapes were there, just no one was looking. In the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, the building in Montmartre changed hands. Studio Ferber closed. Apartments were built in its place. The attic wasn't renovated, just old furniture, chests, and forgotten belongings remained. In the 2000s, the building was sold again, and the new owners decided to renovate. In 2019, when workers started cleaning the attic, they found a dust-covered chest in the corner. When they opened it, inside were old records, tapes, and papers. The stamp "Do Not Release, Columbia Records 1949 inches was still readable, but no one understood its importance. The foreman asked, "Is this trash?" One of the young workers said, "I don't know, maybe antiques." And chance intervened. One of the workers working in the building that day was a music enthusiast, had a record collection at home. He examined the records in the chest and saw a name, Billie Holiday, Paris Sessions, May 1949. His heart raced. This was impossible. Was the legend of the lost recordings real? He told the foreman, "This isn't trash, this could be treasure," and carefully set the chest aside. That night, he researched online, Billie Holiday, 1949, Paris recordings lost. He found dozens of articles, forum discussions. It was one of music history's greatest mysteries. The next day, he went to the music department at Sorbonne University and met with a professor. When the professor saw the chest, he held his breath. "If these are real," he said, "this would be one of music history's greatest discoveries." The chest was taken to the French National Sound Archives, and experts began examination. The tapes were 70 years old and fragile. They needed to be carefully restored. After months of work, the first tape was played, and at that moment, 70 years later, Billie Holiday's uncensored voice was heard again. The French National Sound Archives announced the discovery to the public in November 2019. At a press conference, archive director, Dr. Marie Leclerc, made a statement. 70 years later, we found Billie Holiday's lost Paris recordings. 12 songs, never released, never heard. These recordings will rewrite music history. The news made headlines worldwide. The New York Times wrote Billie Holiday's lost voice found. The Guardian ran the headline, 70 years later, Lady Day's censored truth emerges. The music world waited excitedly. When would the recordings be released? Dr. Leclerc explained, "The recordings are being restored. They'll be released in 2020. But there was a problem. As the archive team listened to the recordings, they realized some songs were too political, too dangerous, especially the 12th song. Untitled song contained real names, real accusations. Leclerc consulted with the legal team. Can we release these recordings? These recordings. There's freedom of expression, but real people's names are mentioned. The lawyers examined it, and the answer was complicated. Most of the people mentioned in the songs are dead, but some may be alive, or their heirs could sue. Also, the US government might react because FBI agents' names are there. Leclerc was shocked. 70 years have passed. Is there still censorship? But that was the reality. Billie Holiday's voice was still too powerful, still too dangerous. Leclerc made a decision. They would release 11 songs, but keep Untitled Song restricted. We'll release the song's melody and Billie's voice, but we'll silence some parts of the lyrics where names are mentioned. This decision created controversy. Music historians were outraged. Are you still applying censorship 70 years later? They asked. But Leclerc defended, we're trying to protect Billie's legacy. If we release the entire song, legal problems will arise, and all recordings could be pulled back. But this way, at least the world will hear Billie's voice. And in February 2020, the recordings were released. An album came out titled Billie Holiday, The Lost Paris Sessions, 1949. 11 songs in full, Untitled Song, as a partial version. The album caused an earthquake in the music world. Critics wrote, "We've never heard Billie Holiday like this." The new version of Strange Fruit was especially powerful. The verses Billie added to the original song told the reality of lynching much more explicitly. She named governors, senators, real politicians, serving in 1949. Music historians checked. Yes, the names Billie listed were real. Alabama Governor Jim Folsom, Mississippi Senator James Eastland, all people who had blocked anti-lynching legislation. Billie had accused them by name 70 years ago, and now the world was hearing it. The mention of J. Edgar Hoover in the God Bless the Child version was also shocking. Billie was openly accusing the FBI director. The verses she added, "Mr. Hoover is following me, watching my every move, because I'm telling the truth," showed how intense the FBI pressure was in 1949. Historians checked the archives and confirmed, in 1949, the FBI was indeed keeping Billie Holiday under intense surveillance. Every concert was monitored. Every hotel room was reported. What Billie said in Paris wasn't just paranoia, it was real. Her mention of Alderson Prison in the Fine and Mellow song was also very personal and painful. In the middle of the song, Billie sang, 10 months in that little cell, no window, no sun, just walls and silence." She had never spoken so openly about her prison experience. Because in America, she wasn't allowed to. Her contracts had a clause, will not speak about prison experience. But in Paris, in that midnight studio, she was free and telling the truth. Listeners cried, "Ne Parisian," because the pain, anger, and desperation in Billie's voice was so real, it touched hearts. Her accusation of record companies in the My Man song was also a bold move. "Do you know what Columbia pays me? 5 cents per record. They make millions. I'm still in debt to them," she sang. These accusations could have created a scandal in 19. Copyright exploitation was the dark secret of the music industry. But Billie wasn't staying silent, she was telling truth. When modern music historians examined the recordings, they confirmed her rightness. Yes, Columbia Records and other record companies were paying very low royalties to Black artists at that time. Billie Holiday had sold millions of records, but died poor. This was why. But the album's most controversial piece was Untitled Song. In the version released in 2020, the song's melody and Billie's voice were there, but critical parts of the lyrics were silenced. At each silence, Listeners wondered what was Billie saying at that moment. What names were mentioned? Dr. Marie Leclerc made a statement at the press conference. Untitled song mentions FBI agents' real names. Some may still be alive. Some have heirs to their families' legacies. For legal reasons, we can't release the full version. But music activists objected. 70 years have passed. Where's freedom of expression? Is Billie Holiday's voice still being censored? The controversy grew, and in 2021, a group of music historians and human rights lawyers filed a lawsuit. They argued that the full version of Untitled Song should be released. The case went to French courts, and the judge made a strange decision. The song is an artistic work and is covered by freedom of expression, but the names mentioned in it belong to real people, and some accusations could be defamatory. Therefore, the song can be released for academic research purposes, but commercial publication is restricted. What did this mean? Untitled Song could be listened to in university archives by researchers, but couldn't be publicly released on Spotify, on YouTube for everyone. This decision satisfied no one, but at least access to the song was provided. In 2022, a group of music historians at Columbia University listened to and analyzed the full version of Untitled Song. The results were shocking. In the song, Billie Holiday told exactly which FBI agents followed her, on what dates and where they were. Agent Fletcher knocked on my door on March 15th. Agent White listened to my phones for 3 months. Agent Davis set me up with heroin, arrested me in 1947. Researchers checked FBI archives. Thanks to the Freedom of Information Act, some documents were now public, and what they found was incredible. Everything Billie Holiday said was true. In FBI files were the names of Agent Fletcher, Agent White, Agent Davis. The dates matched. The events were real. In 1949, Billie Holiday had proven everything she said, but no one had listened to her then. In the last part of the song, Billie had gone even further. She had talked about President Truman counted the names of black prisoners who were executed and said, the president could have saved them but didn't. Researchers examined black prisoners executed between 1945 to 1949 and saw that Billie was right. Many cases were unjust, many prisoners were innocent, but executions weren't stopped. Billie Holiday wasn't just singing an emotional song, she was creating a historical document. And the system wanted this document hidden for 70 years because the truths were too disturbing. Between 2020 to 2020, for the release of the recordings forced a re-evaluation of Billie Holiday's legacy. Now everyone knew that Billie wasn't just a jazz singer, she was an activist, a rebel, a truth teller. Strange Fruit wasn't just a song, it was a weapon, a protest, a manifesto. And the forces trying to silence Billie's voice, the FBI, record companies, the government, were on the dark side of history. After the recordings came out, artists like Beyoncé, Andra Day, her paid tribute to Billie. Beyoncé wrote in a 2020 Instagram post, Billie Holiday showed us the way. She used her art to tell the truth, and she was punished for it. But her voice could never be silenced. Academic circles also took action. Conferences on Billie Holiday and censorship were held at Columbia, Harvard, Yale universities. Researchers examined record companies' censorship mechanisms, the FBI's strategies for targeting artists, and a terrible truth emerged. Billie Holiday wasn't alone. In the 1940s and 1950s, dozens of black artists had been subjected to similar pressures. Paul Robeson, Lena Horne, Harry Belafonte, all had been followed by the FBI, punished career-wise. But most couldn't be as brave as Billie, because they saw what happened to Billie and were afraid. Billie Holiday's lost recordings weren't just her story. They were the story of an entire generation of black artists being silenced. In 2023, a special memorial ceremony was held at the Grammy Awards. The album Billie Holiday, The Lost Paris Sessions, won the Best Historical Album Award. 64 years after her death, Billie Holiday won a new Grammy, Dr. Marie Leclerc took the stage to accept the award and said in her speech, "This award isn't just for Billie Holiday, it's for all artists whose voices have been silenced." For 70 years, these recordings were hidden because the system was afraid of the truth, but truth always comes out. And Billie's voice is stronger today than it ever was in the past. The hall gave a standing ovation, and many artists had tears streaming from their eyes, because everyone knew that Billie Holiday's struggle was still ongoing. In early 2024, something unexpected happened. The full version of Untitled Song leaked onto the internet. An unknown source uploaded the uncensored version of the song to a torrent site, and within hours, thousands of people downloaded it. The French National Sound Archives panicked. Copyrights, legal issues, scandal. But it was too late now. The song had spread. On YouTube, on SoundCloud, on social media, everyone was sharing Untitled Song, and the world finally heard Billie Holiday's fully uncensored voice. Reactions were incredible. Hashtags exploded on social media. #Billie was right. #Untitled Song Truth. #FBI 1949. Millions of people listened to the song and were shocked because everything Billie said was true, could be proven. Even the FBI's official Twitter account had to respond. For the first time in years, they made a statement about a historical event. "Some of our investigative tactics during the 1940 to 1950 period did not meet our current standards. We regret past practices." This apology wasn't enough. Of course, activists wanted more. Release all of Billie Holiday's file. Which agents, which orders, which operations make everything public? Though the FBI resisted, pressure increased. At the end of 2024, a bill was introduced in Congress, Artist Files Transparency Act, making it mandatory to open to the public all historical files the FBI kept on artists. The bill is still being debated, but Billie Holiday's lost recordings started this movement. The music industry also changed. Artists began demanding no censorship clauses in their contracts. The clause "record company cannot interfere with artistic content" became standard, and copyright reform discussions reignited. Billie Holiday's exploitation by Columbia Records became a lesson for modern artists. Platforms like Spotify, Apple Music updated their artist rights policies. What Billie Holiday said 75 years ago was changing the music industry in 2024. When these recordings were found, Henry Ferber's name also came to light again. Music historians researched, who was this man? Why did he help Billie? Why did he keep the secret? Henry Ferber was born in Paris in 1905, grew up in a Jewish family. During the Nazi occupation, he had lost most of his family. After the war, he opened Studio Ferber and worked with jazz artists. When he met Billie Holiday, he had empathy for her because he too knew what it was like to be oppressed, to be silenced. Henry's grandson gave an interview in 2020. "My grandfather always spoke of Billie Holiday with respect. That woman was telling the truth, and it scared the system," he would say. And he was proud to keep those recordings, because he knew that one day the truth would come out. In 2021, Paris City Council hung a memorial plaque on the building where Studio Ferber was located. Here in 1949, Billie Holiday made historic recordings. Henry Ferber protected these recordings for 70 years. Truth finally emerged. During the ceremony, Billie Holiday's songs were played and hundreds of people attended. The French Minister of Culture said in his speech, "Henry Ferber was a silent hero. He carried Billie Holiday's voice to the future." And the music world understood that sometimes heroes are studio engineers, archive workers, ordinary people keeping secrets. In 1949, Billie Holiday had told Henry Ferber, "Maybe in 10 years, 20 years, if America changes, maybe then the world will be ready." It took 75 years, but Billie's vision came true. The world changed, America changed, not completely, but enough. Now a black woman accusing the FBI isn't a scandal, it's accepted as historical fact. Now talking about record companies' exploitation isn't taboo, reform is being discussed. And now Billie Holiday is remembered not just as a jazz legend, but as a human rights activist. In 2024, many universities added Billie Holiday to their curriculum, not just in music departments, but in history, political science, sociology departments too. Because Billie's story was more than music, it was a story of fighting power, resisting censorship, having the courage to tell the truth. Modern artists draw inspiration from Billie. Kendrick Lamar named a song Untitled for Billie on his 2024 album, The Bullet. There's a song criticizing the FBI, the system, racism. Beyoncé pays tribute to Billie Holiday at her concerts, goes on stage with a gardenia flower. Even Taylor Swift, though coming from a different music world, talks about Billie's struggle. Billie Holiday fought against record companies. I'm fighting too. She lost, but she showed us the way. And the young generation, Gen Z, is rediscovering Billie Holiday on TikTok, on Instagram. Millions of young people share Untitled song and write. Billie said all this 75 years ago. Today, if you pass in front of that old building in Paris's Montmartre district, you'll see the memorial plaque on the wall, and sometimes tourists stop there and take photos. Because this isn't just a historical place, it's a symbol of resistance. In 1949, in this building, Billie Holiday recorded her voice that couldn't be silenced. Columbia Records, the FBI, the government, they all tried to hide that voice. They hid it for 70 years, but the voice still came out, because truth always finds a way. Maybe it takes 10 years, maybe it takes 70 years, but eventually it emerges. When Billie Holiday died in 1959, she didn't know that her lost recordings would one day be found. When Henry Ferber kept those recordings, he couldn't imagine they would create worldwide resonance 70 years later. But they both knew one thing: truth matters. Telling the truth matters. And sometimes the price of telling the truth is heavy. Career, freedom, even life. But it still needs to be told. Because future generations will need that truth. And Billie Holiday's lost recordings proved exactly that. Now when you listen to those recordings, the uncensored version of Strange Fruit, the angry verses of God Bless the Child, the bold accusations of Untitled Storm, you're not just hearing music. You're hearing a woman's courage. You're hearing the voice of a woman who fought the system, who wasn't afraid to tell the truth, who was ready to pay the price. And perhaps most importantly, you're hearing a voice that couldn't be silenced. 75 years have passed, Billie died, but her voice is still here, still powerful, still dangerous, still true. In 1949, in Paris, Billie Holiday said,
Well, somebody has to.
and she did. And 75 years later, the world is finally listening.